What's up, everybody? This is Ryan Rush, and you're watching the Paranormal Rush Hour. This is an interview episode with my friend and the ghost biker, Miranda Young. Say hey, Miranda.
Hey guys.
She's a really, really cool person, and she has done some really cool things with her show, Ghost Biker Explorations. And I urge everyone to go and check out her channel right now and subscribe to it because she does like professional type of episodes that are well worth watching. So anyway, Miranda, how did you get started doing the Ghost Biker explorations?
Well, I started out as a paranormal investigator on a team. My background was in photography, and so I was doing their photo analyzing as well as putting their videos together. And I was with the team for about 8 years, and I found that on the weekends and any opportunity that I was out by myself and not investigating with the team, I was actually out on my motorcycle going to different historic or interesting locations that I was highlighting on my social media. And so I had a lot of people that were asking questions about some of the photography and some of the different locations that I was visiting. They were asking, what's the story behind this? Are they haunted? Or just what's the history behind the location itself? And so I got to thinking, I should really document my travels and document all of this. And I was also going to riding my motorcycle to different investigations with the team. And so I sat down and I just kind of started thinking a little more seriously about it and talking to a couple friends. And that's really how Ghost Biker Explorations was born. The idea, came to mind, and then sort of started coming up with a way to put these episodes out, sort of the way a TV series would do. And so the idea started March of 2018. Other than telling the guy who went along with me during the first and second season about what I was doing, I kind of pretty much kept it a secret until we did the release in October of 2018.
Huh. So you kept it a secret from the guy that was actually going and recording you?
No, I kept it a secret from everyone other than him about what we were doing. He and I sat down, kind of came up with,
That
whether we would, how we wanted to release it,
it makes a lot
and
more sense than what I
how to do
thought.
the episodes.
It does. It makes a lot more sense than what I thought you said.
Yeah, I misspoke. I said that.
No, I
Yeah,
think that was
originally
me.
yeah, I didn't even tell those closest to me what we were doing because they knew I was investigating with the team, and I investigated with them up until the release of Ghost Biker, and once the first season released, I found that I just didn't, because I did so much with the team, I just didn't have time to really devote going on the investigations with the team and then sitting and doing the actual research and editing and the actual investigation for Ghost Biker Explorations. So I ended up stepping away from the team at that point just so I could devote 100% of my time to Ghost Biker.
I think that was probably a good decision too, because you did,
Yeah.
yeah, you really do some cool stuff on that show. Now, I know you've told me about some of the really crazy stuff that's happened to you, and we'll get into that, but uh, I want to know what kind of locations do you actually go to on your on the show? Like, what are they, historical locations or just strictly haunted, or what type are there?
Well, it's kind of a mixture of all of the above. It really started out as going to more lesser known, more obscure locations. We obviously you've got the big commercial locations that everyone's heard about, but my goal with Ghost Biker Explorations was to actually, talk about the travel and talk about the different towns that I'm going to visit, as well as having an interesting story to go along with the locations. As far as the actual episodes, the places that I visit, um, they're either rumored to be haunted and, are part of local folklore and legend, or, it's, something that I've gotten from some of the different, small town books, like, say, for instance, 13 Ghosts in Jeffrey in Tennessee.
I love that book.
Haunted Birmingham. Some of those different books I will get my stories from. I often tell people that I challenge them to close their eyes and touch anywhere on a map. And if, when they look at where they're touching, there's going to be somewhere that has a haunted story or some type of legend. It may be only, local to that area, or it may be regionally known. But I challenge them, most of the time they can't find a place that doesn't have some type of story. And so I'll spend a couple months researching these different places, finding the story behind it, and then I'll travel there, write my script for my story, and then, tell the actual story as to why I'm there, as well as the history of the location, and then do the paranormal investigation. So each episode, while it may not be very long in length, maybe 20 to 40 minutes, we try to cram those three elements into the actual episode. And a lot of the places that we visited, a lot of the different locals have said, that they didn't actually know the entire story behind it. So that's what I pride myself on the episodes. We have visited some large historic and haunted areas like Brushy Mountain State Prison. That's one of the bigger ones that I've visited and spent the night at. But most of what we try to highlight on the show are the lesser known locations.
Now, Miranda, you actually go and spend the night at these places too. And that is something that I mentioned it in my last video when I was announcing the interview. I mentioned that there's just no way I would stay in some of these places that you have stayed. I don't know how you've done it. But then again, I said, I will go walk through a Sasquatch-infested forest by myself at night with no problem. So, there's always something that we we can do. But yeah, but still, the stuff you do, oh my gosh, man. I don't know how you've done that. So tell us about like one of the craziest places that you've been to and stayed overnight. What has happened to you in some of these places?
Yeah, so, a couple of the episodes, have been ones that were places we weren't actually able to stay, like the mausoleum and that sort of thing. So we would go and try to spend as much time as possible. But probably one of the craziest ones that I stayed at was Brushy Mountain State Prison. And I've actually investigated that location on 6 different occasions. And on one in particular, I ended up sleeping in the hole, which is their solitary confinement area. And it is literally an area that they quit using it in the 80s, but it is literally in this building that's kind of down in a hole. And so it's pitch black, and they had, they were given 2 buckets while they were in there, and sometimes the people were in there for up to 20-something days, and so when they would come out, they couldn't see very well. They had to reacclimate. And during the time that I slept in this location, I slept for about 3.5 hours, and in my opinion, I got about 3 minutes and 15 seconds of some of the best Class A EVPs and activity that I've ever got. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to document that and highlight that on episode 1 of season 2. We did a full-scale investigation there, but we did flashback to where I had slept in that location. And I was actually the only, it was myself and 2 other ladies that were on the property. The 2 ladies, they were actually asleep in the office area. They run the paranormal there. They were basically just there in case there were any, issues or anything of that nature. But and the hole is off of the main complex, so there were no males. There were no, like I said, no people in general other than just myself there. So I hope everyone will go and check that out, because I'm pretty proud of that evidence. It's some of the best that I've got, and it was just myself, my recorder, and a stationary camera in there while I slept.
Oh man, yes! Everybody, please go and check that out on Miranda's channel, Ghost Biker. It's Ghost Biker is what it's called, but her show is Ghost Biker Explorations, and that was It was episode 1 of season 2, right?
Yes.
Yes, go check that out, everybody. Check out Miranda's channel. It's very, very good.
Yeah, I do like to sleep in a lot of locations because, for several reasons. One, because usually I'm on my motorcycle, and, you got to get some sleep between your travels. And so I kind of look at it as, why not sleep at the location and, document it with audio and video, because you just never know. But then also, I get different types of evidence when I'm doing that than when I'm just there investigating. And I feel like a lot of the time it's because, when you go into that sleep state, you're kind of putting yourself in a more vulnerable state. And so I've been in locations where I've not got a lot of activity while I was investigating. But then once I laid down to go to sleep, everything just kind of, came alive at that point. So and a lot of time it's a little bit different activity than what I would typically get when I was awake. So it's just one of the approaches I like to take when I go to a location. If I can sleep there, I always like to, and I don't sleep for long. I investigate the majority of the time, but if I can get a couple hours of sleep, I definitely welcome that. Just because it really works out well for me.
Yes, I bet it does. I know what you mean, though. I mean, when you are asleep, you are completely vulnerable, basically. I mean, you're unconscious. You're, just your astral body is not, completely within within the shell that it's usually in. So I've always thought you're more susceptible to having paranormal experiences while you're asleep because of the fact that your astral body actually raises a little bit out of your physical body.
Absolutely, and it just it for me, even, and like I said, the activity has been different sometimes. I typically don't get scared or intimidated at these locations, and sometimes I think that certain entities might be intimidated, to interact in that type of situation sometimes. And so when you go into that more vulnerable sleep state, more things happen, and at least as far as the activity that I've encountered. And so it's always something, like I said, if I can do it, I always want to, and then I'm always interested to see what I get. And I actually sleep some of the best sleep when I'm in these locations.
I can believe it. I can totally believe that. Yeah, yeah. And I honestly never would have thought about that, the way that you said that, about some of them being more intimidated by you not being fearful or not being reactive in a way that other people are to whatever they do. Yeah, that I've never thought about it like that. That's a completely new perspective on that. I mean, it's really interesting that you would see it like that. You know what I mean?
Well, one place comes to mind, and that's kind of what got me thinking that way. I was myself and another female investigator. We went to Revenant Acres in Indiana. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
No.
But it doesn't really have I've got some theories on it, but it doesn't really have a dark history or any type of history that is very well known. It's very cloaked, in mystery and everything as to why the type of activity that they got in this house, why it happened. But there's been several different investigators who have had some very negative activities in this house. And so I was really intrigued by it because of its lack of history, the history of the area, but because of its lack of story, I guess. And there had been 2 documented cases of spiritual possession that had happened in this location, and I had seen the videos from one of them. And if it wasn't legit, I mean, this guy would have, he was a great actor if it wasn't legit.
Right.
Because it was pretty incredible. And so, myself and this other seasoned investigator went up for a girls' weekend. And what was interesting was when we met with the lady who let us into the house, she was like, it's just you two? And we were like, yeah, it's just us. And she was like, well, we've never had just 2 girls, kind of stay here. And I don't know if she was trying to scare us or not, but she said, that they believed, what was in there, it went by the name of 7, which
Wow.
is a phenomenon that is kind of common in the paranormal world at several different locations.
Huh.
And
You'll have to
so
elaborate on that, Miranda, because or in a minute after you get done with this, because
sure.
that's interesting. I've never heard that. I'd like to know more about it. But yeah, go ahead and
Sure.
finish what you're saying here.
That was the first place that I had actually heard of 7, and so they had told us that, and they may have been, we didn't know if they were trying to scare us or what, but they said that they felt like that this entity was wanting to possess a female, and so for myself. The dark entities are not necessarily something that I just go seeking out. I tend to head down the more historical route, but I've come into contact with some dark entities through my travels, and this house was definitely one of them. And what was interesting about it is, so they tell us this story about thinking that it wants to possess a female. And we had a pretty good game plan going in. I like to do the Estes method and the Gonsfeld method,
Mm-hmm.
those different experiments. But we had decided in this type of location where you have to really open yourself up, and in a sense, you become a medium of sorts. In doing those experiments, we had decided we weren't going to do anything like that where you kind of had to open yourself up. We were going to be careful with our experiments that we did. And we had decided, we had investigated with each other for, many years, and had decided that we were going to really pay attention to each other, personalities, different things, to where if there was something that just didn't seem right, we would kind of step back and leave the house. And so we went through the investigation for the majority of the night, and it was pretty benign. Everything that we dealt with, we think we had come into contact with a mother and father and child, and they were had a couple great EVP sessions. This was part of season 2 as well, and it was episode 3, so we've got it all documented on there. But things got a little bit crazy whenever we decided we were going to go to sleep. So we slept in different areas. We were having more activity downstairs than we did upstairs. 7's room was upstairs. And this house, just looking at it, I mean, it's a creepy house. Very, it's the architecture is very old. It's very small, and it's very, it's just a creepy place when you look at it at first sight. And so I wanted to sleep where we were getting a lot of activity in the downstairs living room, and it was at the base of the stairs. And so as I was sleeping, my friend, she slept in the kitchen, and she slept in front of the monitors. And so I went into this deep sleep. It was in October of 2 years ago, and October in Indiana was pretty cold. It was in the lower 40s. And so ended up going into this really deep sleep. It was such a deep sleep that I didn't hear the REM pod, the K2s, and the periscope going off on the piano beside me.
Oh,
It
wow.
took a little while for me to actually hear it and wake up. And so slept about 2 hours, and then we went upstairs that morning and did a great EVP session in Seven's room. And I got stuff on my spirit box that, I have never gotten before. Just the nastiest, most vile responses. I was called a slut. I was called a whore.
Wow.
It did say, I held up, a number of fingers, and I was like, if you can see me, how many fingers am I holding up? And it was responding to that. I kept getting the name Seven and Satan over the spirit box. And this is just a regular SB7 spirit box. I don't use apps because I try to cut out any kind of interference, because we all
Right.
know, our phones listen, and
Right.
some of these apps, you just don't know. Some of them, the way they're developed, use your location. Some of them use microphones, that sort of thing. So this is just using just a standard spirit box. And these are things you wouldn't hear over the airwaves.
No.
And so, what was interesting about it is I ended up getting it, and I didn't show it in my video just because there were several reasons I didn't show it there. But I actually, when I speak about this specific location at different events and stuff that I've done, I actually will show this video. But I ended up getting bruises on my legs and a bite mark on my butt cheek.
Oh, my
And
gosh.
you can actually see when I'm sleeping. What's really interesting is the succession of events is while I'm sleeping, there's something, the cover moves in an odd way that, I'm kind of burritoed in there, but the cover kind of moves in an odd way. And of course, I get up, I go on up and do the session. I hadn't looked at anything. And again, cameras are on me the entire time. And that spirit box keeps coming up. It says, I want to bite it. And
Whoa.
at another point, it said, rape her.
Whoa.
And it said, I bit her. So it was, again, this is not my typical location that I go to. And that's not my typical spirit box session that I got. But from all accounts, from what we had seen, we were somewhat prepared when we went in that this entity did not like women. And so, getting this stuff on the spirit box and then having those markings that I found afterwards leads me to believe that, something happened while I was sleeping at that location. And, it really seemed to affect myself and the girl that was with me in two different ways. Normally I'm a pretty light sleeper, but while I was there, I slept so sound. My friend is the total opposite. She's one, once she goes to sleep, she's out. She could not sleep, and she kept feeling like something was breathing on her while she was laying there in the kitchen watching the videos. And then, any little sound would wake her up. And after we had left, because of the timing and everything, and because it was a girls' trip, I didn't ride the motorcycle. We rode together in the car. It affected her in the sense that she just, was in a real bad mood and didn't really want to talk a whole lot. And, when you've got a trip from Indiana down to Tennessee, and you've got two girls in the car, normally there's a lot of chatting going on.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk a whole lot on the way back. So, and we realized after the fact that it probably affected us a little bit more than what we had thought it did.
I guarantee you it did.
Again, we didn't really even think we got all of that, that much, evidence. But that spirit box session was definitely like nothing I've experienced before when it comes to an SB7 session.
Yeah, that's just, I've never heard of anything like that being said I mean,
Yeah.
anywhere. Yeah, that's just really freaky though. Just
Yeah.
the content of what was said, that's just awful, you know.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
it was horrible.
yeah,
I ended up contacting after I had the bite mark and everything that we had got. I ended up contacting a demonologist and talking to him about it, and just some of the stuff that we had got during that session. And what was interesting is, it kept telling us its name was Seven, and it kept telling us, Satan, and of course, being a negative entity, um, they're not going to be the most honest. We actually got what we think was the name. We got Belor, and
huh?
because we kept pushing and saying, no, who are you really? Who are we really talking to? We know we're not talking to Satan. We're not,
Yeah,
we're not
yeah,
talking to the devil. And we got this just really gruff undertone voice that said Balor, and and that was Hebrew actually,
really,
and so yes, and so that was kind of an interesting thing. That's what we believe we were speaking with. Other than we think that seven was just what it goes by. And like I said, and that's not typical of what I like to put out on my episodes because
right?
you know people are really quick to scream demon and
Yes,
negative and
yes.
everything, and we're not necessarily the people I investigate with or what I like to highlight on my episodes. That's not something I actively go seeking out, but this
Right.
this location really intrigued me.
Well, sometimes you
um,
just run into it and you can't help it, you
you
know.
do.
Yeah, you
You do.
you don't control what kind of entities you're gonna run across. That's for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
So
it's how you deal with it,
exactly.
and everything. And so it was interesting. A lot of I met several other investigators through this experience with Seven, and like I said, I've not encountered him anymore. A lot of people that encounter him once tend to get him at other locations, but there was a group of people who had been to they had been to Revenant Acres, the Monroe House, Hell's Bar Dam, and I believe there was one more. I can't remember if it was an infirmary or exactly where the location was, but they had come together because of this entity. And I was telling some folks at Hell's Bar Dam, because I had just come off of the Revenant episode filming, and they were like, "Oh, well, you need to, meet these folks." And so they were having issues with Seven. Like I said, I have not encountered him at any other locations, thankfully,
Yeah.
but I know that several other people have. And I don't know a whole lot about him. I just know that it was a phenomenon in the community where that some people were. He was popping up at these different locations.
That is weird. I mean, so
Yeah.
it was like the same entity in different locations, various locations.
Mhm.
Wow. And so
Yeah.
you actually, I mean, it's almost like you and these other people are connected in a way by this, by that certain entity.
Mhm.
That's
Absolutely.
really strange. It's like you have a common connection among, just a few other people.
Mhm.
That's interesting though.
Yeah, yeah, and of
Yeah.
course, Revenant Acres is no longer somewhere that you can investigate.
Really?
I was one of the last ones to get to investigate there. The homeowner and his wife, they were older, and the wife passed away, and then the husband passed away within a couple months of each other
Uh-huh.
last year, and so. The family just, I don't know if they didn't have interest in it or if they just didn't want to continue on with it, but they ended up, it was on a farm, and so they ended up splitting up the farm. They've said that the building was going to be torn down, but I've heard from several people it's not been torn down yet, but they have completely closed closed it down with no intention of opening it back up for investigations.
Right. That's interesting, though. I mean, yeah. So the what that I was gonna ask you. That's not the same story that you had told me that one time, though, is it?
It's not.
That's
It's
what I
not.
was thinking. So you've had some really wild stuff happen to you.
I have, in the one that you and I talked about it's a location. It's kind of similar.
Let's talk
In
about
the
that one.
respect.
Tell about that one, Miranda, because it's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, so that one is what I affectionately call the Sunset Hill House,
Uh huh.
and it actually took up several episodes in season one as well as season two, and it actually became a year-long case for me. Like I said, most of my episodes revolve around different local legends or different stories of that nature. I was actually at this home filming episode 2 of season 1, and I was investigating a haunted relic, a haunted tub. And this house had sat abandoned for 12 years. The homeowner, she was an elderly lady, and so she was renting the house out. And so there had been, she had lived in it with her family. Her husband had passed away of a heart attack in the bathroom. And then after she moved out with her family, she rented it. There was a lady, she was an elderly lady. She had a lung disorder, rare lung disorder. She ended up passing away while she was renting it. And then the next the next renter was sort of a hoarding drug type situation. And so after they got rid of her, they didn't rent the house out for those 12 years. And so basically, with the homeowner being elderly, she never really went in the house. She was using it as storage and would basically have someone come over and mow the yard. And so I found out that this alleged haunted tub was in this home. And so she granted me access to be able to go in and investigate. And while I was in there investigating, the activity was so off the chain during that time that I didn't know if the activity was coming from the tub or if there was activity in the house that I was getting from that, because I was getting a lot of activity in the basement area where the tub was, but I was hearing sounds upstairs. It was a split-level house. I was hearing sounds upstairs, and so I decided to put a REM pod up there as well as an audio recorder. And so when I would be down there filming, I would hear sounds that sounded like a body being dragged across the floor.
Oh, man.
Or something hitting against the wall. And then the REM pod would start to go off. And so then I would go up there, and it would stop. So it was like when you weren't paying attention to it, it would do everything it could to get your attention. And then when you started paying attention, it would get quiet. So I contacted the homeowner, and then I found out that they had had activity there while she lived there, and that there was some things that had occurred that she thought had brought on some activity. So I asked her while I was there, which I had limited equipment because I was just there to basically investigate the tub. So I asked if she would mind if I went ahead and did sort of a small-scale investigation on the house. Had some great flashlight activity, a couple of really good REM pod sessions, and some great disembodied voices in Class A EVPs.
And so when you say flashlight activity, what are you talking about there?
I had several of my different flashlights that I would set up. Normally what I like to do is, people will set the flashlights up and they'll ask questions, and ask them, to turn on and off. I like to use the flashlights with other pieces of equipment, so that if the flashlights are going off answering, my questions, my yes/no questions, I like to see if there's any temperature changes or pressure changes. So I'll use my EDI box in conjunction with that because, again, like I said, one thing going off may just be, you might be able to debunk that. But if you can
Right.
get pieces of equipment going off together, then, it's a little more
That's a lot harder.
unexplainable, I
Yeah,
guess.
a lot harder to explain that.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
no doubt.
So I was getting on command. Flashlights were turning on and off to yes and no questions on command. So
Wow.
I contacted the same investigator that went with me to Revenant Acres to see if she would come back and we would bring a lot of equipment more set up to investigate a full scale house. So she came back, and I mean we had poltergeist activity. I mean we had doors slamming on us. We had the things would shake and vibrate while you were sitting there, like furniture and such. And so we did this investigation, and we ended up doing. Like I said, normally it was something a little bit different than what I would typically highlight, but I had it as episode 3, the investigation of the home, and episode 4, where I did the investigation with Tiffany, as well as a live season finale. And what was really cool about this live is that typically when cameras come on, things quit reacting. But in this house, I mean, it was a pretty cool live. You didn't know what was going to happen, but we got a lot of activity. So I had a lot of people asking me throughout the year, what's going on with this house? Were you able to get closure with it? What they didn't know is that at this point, the house became a year-long case study for me, and so I was
Huh.
going in there any opportunity that I could get and doing different experiments, setting up static cameras and letting them run overnight, that sort of thing. And so on one particular occasion, I'd been getting so many questions about this house that I decided what I was going to do was I was going to do a live, and I wanted people to submit questions to me that they had, and I was going to pre-record those questions and then set up cameras throughout this entire house and let and not be there, and run the recorder and see if it reacted different to questions. Well, and then also, since the homeowner hadn't been in the house, I wanted to see if there was any type of connection with the homeowner, because one of the entities she thought might be her husband who had passed away. I tend to think that there was something in there that was mimicking. It was something that was darker, that was mimicking her deceased husband and
Mm.
trying to get her attention to potentially maybe come to the house. So what I did was I had her also record some questions in her voice. And so we went on to this live. It was just going to be a 15-minute live, and people were going to tell me where to set the cameras up because I already had their questions recorded. And this 15-minute live turned into, it was almost a 2-hour live. And it was very, very intense the whole time. It's probably um, my most watched live, as well as most active live. And so after we went off the live, I had to activate the cameras and I had to start the recorder. And so as soon as I turned, the cameras off and started putting everything up, we got this crazy disembodied voice that said, "Miranda, you're going to die." And we were
Oh.
able to catch it on video as well as catch it on the recorder. And so as I'm setting these devices up, we wanted to be out of there at the time, and it was just myself and my videographer. And so we wanted to be out of the house at the time. And as soon as we started the recorder with the homeowner's voice, the floor started shaking.
Oh
And
my
I'm
gosh.
standing up. on the upper level
The
of
floor
the
started
split level house.
shaking.
Yes, and that actually really scared me.
I bet.
As soon as yeah, as soon as her voice came on, the floor starts shaking,
Oh.
and my EDI box that's sitting there. And if you know if you all aren't familiar with an EDI box, to me it's one of my favorite tools because it tells the temperature in real time. It has a geofoam on it where you have to actually touch the box for it to go off. Like it doesn't just detect vibration, it has to actually be touched. It also has an EMF reader on it, so it's a nice little science box, if you will. And that box started going off. Every room in that house was wired up with a camera, and it had some type of tools so that whatever entity or spirit was in that room would have some way of interacting. And REM pods started going off. Every flashlight, each room had a set of flashlights in it. Every tool that I had started going off when that floor started shaking and when the homeowner's voice started going. And it was crazy because I was just, as an investigator, I was intrigued at that point, and I didn't want to leave. And of course, my videographer is like grabbing me. He's like, "We've got to go, Miranda." He's like, "We've got to get out of here. We don't need to be in here at this point." And so we get out of the house, and we were standing outside, and we were doing the prayer of protection, because I always do that before I go into a location, and then as I leave, I always do that. And I remember we were sitting there praying, and I remember looking up after the prayer, and you could just see the lights flashing in the house because the blinds and everything were pulled up in all the rooms, and it just looked like, you know, when a TV is on in a room,
Man.
when you're seeing it from the outside, it was just the whole house was just flashing and lighting up. And I remember leaving and going back to my videographer's home before I came home. And I had a couple people call me that had watched the live, and one girl in particular had called, and she was like, "That was insane, unlike anything I've ever seen." And I'm like, you wouldn't believe what happened when the cameras came off. And I said, or when the live came off, I said, we still had the cameras going, so we were able to capture it. But I'm like, I've never experienced anything like that.
Oh, no.
And so when I went back the next day to pick up the equipment, we used a tactic. We decided we were going to go in. And I was actually kind of nervous about going in because
I bet.
I can remember hearing that homeowner's voice, asking those questions, addressing this entity, and then the floor shaking. So I was a little nervous. Waited until after work and went over. It was dark, and so went over there. And when we went in, normally, because again, I've been going in there for a year, I would just respond to these entities when I would go in. I would talk to them. They got to where they were, saying my name on the recorders, and this was not assisted through any type of spirit box or anything. These were just straight up, out of the air EVPs. So it would address me. But when I went in, there was this air about it that, it was pissed. It was pissed because it was almost like we had fooled it, by playing the voices, and they weren't really there.
Like you got one over on it.
What was that?
Oh, it said like you got one over on it.
Yeah, that's how it appeared, and you could just sense that there was just this, what are you going to do now?
Yes.
And so went in and was gathering everything up, and I had decided I was not going to address it in any way. I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't going to acknowledge, and it was so pissed off when we went in there. And like I said, it was just myself and my videographer, and he's filming the whole time. At one point, I had a rosary hanging up, and again, if people go back and watch the episode, they'll understand why I had this rosary in there. with the haunted tub. And so when I walked past it, something scratched the side of my neck. And so I was standing there talking to my videographer, and it started like flipping at my hair, and so I was hoping that the camera was catching this, because it was just like, it was like flipping and pulling at my hair. And when we went up to the last final room, we had the door cracked. And actually, we didn't crack the door. The door was cracked when we went up to that level. The outside door was cracked, and we noticed it. And so my videographer, he looked over at it, and as we were packing everything up, that door just slams. And it was like, it scared me to death, but I was still not going to acknowledge it. And so when we get out, of course, it was like, oh my gosh, I mean, it wanted to be acknowledged so bad that it was doing everything it could, to get us to acknowledge it. And so not long after we did that experiment, we were contacted by the homeowner she was wanting to fix the house up and rent it out. And so, and I think maybe eventually, she still owns it, but maybe eventually sell it. And so she wanted it to be cleaned. And so I ended up contacting a demonologist that I had met a couple months earlier. And he came in, and he did a home liberation, which essentially is a home exorcism. And it was a 10-hour process. It was unlike anything that I've ever experienced before. And he went in, and as of now, which it's been about a year and a half since, the people who were fixing the house up, they were aware of what was going on because they were family of the homeowners. And then the renters that moved in, they were made aware of what was going on. And check in, periodically with them. And the house has absolutely no activity. Now, I think that the renters have to be careful, because I think with an infestation that bad, that it's possible that, things could come back. I myself will not go in there right now. I just talked to her via phone because as an investigator, it's tempting to want to, throw down a recorder and ask some questions. But after going through that whole process, I don't want to, open any doors to invite anything back in. So
I don't blame you a bit.
So they don't have anything, and the house is just it's so much lighter. I mean, you could feel it was such an exhausting process. And throughout that year-long research, I found that I believed there were at least 5 entities in there. 2 of them were negative. The other 3 weren't negative. I mean, they were just, and out of the 2 that were negative, there was one that I don't know if he was really negative or just more aggressive.
Yeah.
But there was definitely one very dark entity in there, and he was essentially oppressing the other spirits that was in the location. And so, in order to complete the home liberation or home exorcism, the demonologist and his partner had to have a sign of departure. And it was pretty amazing to witness each of those signs of departure. They could have been something as simple and as subtle as, a click to, a door slam. But there was definitely a sign of departure for each of those entities as they left. And again, it was an exhausting 10-hour process. And you never know how long they're going to be, whenever you go to do one of these. And so I was honored that they allowed us to be there. we filmed the process and was able to show it in a way that, doesn't really give away everything that's being done, but gives the gist of what's happening. And then also, this was a first for the demonologist. He had never had recorders and paranormal equipment going while he was doing one of those. And some of the conversations and communications that we caught with the entities in the house as they struggled to stay was pretty incredible.
Oh, I bet. I mean, that's just crazy though that they struggled to stay in that house just to
Yeah,
just to wreak more havoc. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
And, it'd be interesting to talk to some of the other families on that street.
Oh, super
They didn't know what
interesting.
we were doing when we were coming in, but I mean, I firmly believe with something as infested as that house was with negative activity. I mean, you just felt it as you came into the neighborhood. I mean, you couldn't not know that there was something wrong with this house just looking at it. But I would be interested to see if any of the other neighbors or anyone actually had any type of activity kind of coming and going from their home, just to, I mean, I would be surprised if they didn't
Right.
have activity.
Right. I've thought about that too, about how if there is one place that's really haunted within, a certain area, that other places around it might be more susceptible to having activity too from being so close to that area or that
Yeah,
one
and I
place.
think so. I mean, for myself, a couple really haunted places that I've gone to and stayed at, the Lizzie Borden house being one,
Oh,
and then the
yeah.
Bel Air house in Bel Air, Ohio. Um, from talking to the people who, are the caretakers of both of those locations, um, Lizzie Borden has activity from, I mean, of course, being the house that it is, it has activity, but it actually has activity in the upstairs of a lady and two children, that was from a house down the street where she killed her children. She killed them in a well.
Oh,
Um,
gosh.
she said, the Lord told her to do it.
Oh, of
And so
course.
it was a pretty crazy killing. And that house gets that activity. And then the Bel Air house, um, from what I've heard, when you see the house beside of it, it's in Bel Air, Ohio is, it's right on the West Virginia line, and it's sort of
Right.
a depressed town, and a depressed and oppressed town because there's not a lot of jobs there and a lot
Right.
of unemployment, and it's right next to sort of a high drug area,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so you could tell the house beside it was and high crime as well, and you could tell the house beside it had something not right about it, and we were asking the caretaker about that, and he was like, look, that house over there, it was a house with the people who owned it had got in trouble. They had a child porn ring
Oh, gosh.
going out of it. Yeah, and so I don't know if some of the activity from the Bel Air house, transitions over to that home, or if some of the activity they had in that home transitions to the Bel Air house. But in both of those two situations, those were traveling type situations. So as much activity that was going on at the Sunset Hill house, I would say that some of the neighbors probably had some unexplained activity that they would, happen in their homes
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
I'd be surprised if they didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, being around something that haunted, you're going to have
Hmm.
to, yeah, have something to deal with. I mean, I don't see how you could get
Yeah.
around it. Yeah, one of the things that really interests me about how you do your investigations is like the way you use the dowsing rods.
Hmm.
And yeah, tell everybody about how you do that because I really think that dowsing rods are some of the probably the most accurate things you can use as far as just manual tools go. And
Yes.
yeah, you've had some
I
cool
totally agree
results
with
with
that.
them.
Yeah, that's another one of my favorite tools. Doing what I do and being on the motorcycle, I find that I do really have to plan my investigations, and pack light on
Yeah.
these investigations. And that means, taking the essential tools for that area, whether it be, essential trigger items or whatnot. But there are a couple tools I always have, and the dowsing rods are definitely one of those. I like them for several reasons. One, because they are so simple. You can ask the yes or no questions by, yes, cross the rods, no, keep the rods open. You can also ask directional questions. I kind of like to set the mood when I'm going to use my dowsing rods and say, if there's somebody here, if you can see me and know, what I'm doing, can you point to, the rods to a specific item in the room?
Yeah.
I like that, again, because they are simple. And then also, a lot of the spirits that we are dealing with, these individuals, come from that time frame where they used to use the rods. I mean, they're actually familiar to them. When we're using things like the EDI box or the K2 or the REM pod, these are items that a lot of these spirits haven't ever used before.
Oh yeah, it just
And so
didn't
it can be
exist.
intimidating.
Yes, yes. Nothing like that existed back when some of these people were on Earth.
Exactly. I mean, if they can truly see us, I don't know if they can even see color. So when we're telling them, to
Right.
touch the green light and make it go red, I'm not sure if they can do that. But they're probably thinking like a candle or like light, and
Yep.
so you don't want to touch that. So the rods are easy. They're not intimidating, and they're familiar. And that's how I like to use them. And it's also something that, if you've ever used the rods before, they're hard to control, because
Yeah.
they are the copper rod that spins inside that little sheath. And so when I'm asking things to point at specific things in the room, it would be hard for me to move it to that area and stop on command, just because they do free spin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've tried to take the experiments with those rods a step further, and actually, to try to kind of cut out the questions or the potential, human error. And a lot of the time I will do my dowsing rod sessions blindfolded. And so that way, I don't know necessarily where it's stopping at, when I ask the questions.
Yep.
And sometimes I'll even go as far to like print out pictures and, have my videographer, who's in the room or whatever, place the pictures in certain areas. And so when I'm asking questions, I don't always know where it's pointing to and that sort of thing. So I try to kind of think
That's a good
outside the
idea.
box and, use
Yeah.
those tools.
Like put a point of reference to it, and that way you'll know for sure what it's going to. Yeah. That's a
Yes.
really good idea there. So, what made you think about using the dowsing rods? Because I really don't know. I know of people using them, but I don't know too many that actually do utilize them in investigations. And I think it's a really good tool to use because of all the reasons you stated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had actually seen somebody at Brushy Mountain use them. I was familiar with them because my dad had used them, and my grandmother back, a long time ago, had
Yeah.
actually used them for witching water.
If you're dowsing
But,
water, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was familiar with them for their practical purpose, but there was a lady at Brushy Mountain who I was on an investigation, and she was using them, and I was real intrigued by it. And so, I know different people find different tools that they like to use, and or that works for them. Some people use a pendulum. Some people, do use different tools. But I found that the rods actually work really well for me. And yeah, I mean, I saw saw her using them, and I thought, how can I take this, a step further and incorporate this into my investigations? And so found a pair online and started practicing with them, and they are part of my essential tools that I always take with me to different places.
Yeah, you better keep those in your essential tool bag too, because that's the one thing that'll never fail you. Something you can't turn on and
Yeah,
off.
and what's great about it? So a couple things, when they don't work for me, to me, I feel like it validates when they do work.
Right.
Because I do usually have such good luck with them when they're not working. I feel like that really helps to, validate when they are giving me answers.
Yep.
And then also, I was doing an investigation over at my grandparents' farmhouse, and it's not a haunted location. I know several folks that have passed there in the family, and my grandfather and great grandfather was one of them, or two of them, and again, like I said, nothing tragic or anything has happened there, and so I was just trying to investigate, and was using my ovulus, and sometimes the ovulus will just spit random words
Right.
out.
Right.
I was in there, and I was getting set up. I had it turned on, and I sat my rods down next to the ovulus, and as soon as I set it down, the ovulus says water. And so I thought that was actually really kind of cool, because
That is.
We were at the farm, and they would have known, that's what those tools would have been used for, not as a means of communication, but as a means of finding water. So I thought that was kind of a neat piece of evidence.
Identified the purpose of what you had.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool, and that's some.
And that was really all the evidence that I got there at the farmhouse. Was just a few words on the ovulus, and they were all utilitarian words, and but I kind of found that to be really compelling, just for what it was.
Oh, absolutely. Now, there was that story, I was thinking about this earlier, that one you told me about the mist, kind of the smoky looking apparition type thing you saw in the flashlight or something, wasn't it? In like the beam of a flashlight. Yeah, something. I want you to talk about that, Miranda, and then if you're done talking after that, that's totally fine, because I don't want to keep you too long. We're doing a late show tonight, guys, so Miranda has been really gracious staying up and dealing with me and my technical problems that I always have.
Yeah, no, that was actually one of my coolest experiences that I've ever had on an investigation, and that was at Brushy Mountain State Prison. That was also, so that weekend that I had stayed there, the first night was when I had stayed by myself, and the other two ladies were there in the office, and I slept in the hole. The next night, they had invited several different teams in, and it was some of their teams that had investigated throughout the year. They had invited us all back, and it was over Easter weekend, because we wanted to try and see if, being that time of year and that holiday and everything, if the activity would be different on that weekend. And so that second night, there were, I believe it was 4 other teams, and so there were 9 of us, and we were all in the cafeteria area. And the cafeteria is a very active area for several reasons. They've had one of the guys that was in there, he had gotten chopped up with a meat cleaver, one of the guys that was cooking food. And then also, there's just all kinds of fights and everything that breaks out there in the cafeteria. So it was a very active area. And of course, at that time, nobody was videoing, because one of the teams had just come off of a live, and they have pretty poor service there. And then I think several others had been videoing, but had just decided to break. And so we were all sitting there, and we were conducting several Native American experiments, playing different chants. We had some different Native American trigger items. But this room, if you've never been there, if you can imagine, it's a big open room with columns just throughout this common area.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're sitting there, and we had a flashlight going while we were doing these experiments. And, I'm going to try to explain it as best I can. But so the flashlight is sitting about 3 feet up. The column is brick for the first 3 feet, and then it's, just a regular column from that point on. So the flashlight was sitting on this column, and it was casting its beam throughout this big room. And so, if you're sitting by the lot, you see the light casting out into the room, and then you also see the light casting down on the floor. So we just got finished playing a chant, and as we were sitting there on the recorders, you hear this voice say, "Watch this." And as it says it, just seconds after, you hear us all go crazy, just like, "Oh my gosh, did you see that?" All 9 of us saw what I'm about to tell you. And what was interesting about it is we captured the voice on 3 recorders, so we were actually able to triangulate where the voice was coming from based on its distance between myself and 2 other investigators that were sitting throughout the room. But what we saw, I've only ever heard this described this way at one other place, and that was at the Lizzie Borden house. But we're sitting there, and we didn't hear the "watch this" happen in real time. We didn't hear that. We actually heard that voice after we were going back and reviewing evidence. But after it says that, you see this little area on the ground. The best way I can think to describe it is like a little cyclone. And so where the flashlight is shining onto the ground, you can see this little spinning in the beam of the flashlight that's probably coming up maybe 2 feet off the ground, and it's spinning. And then as you see that happening, on the floor, it's like you see a head and shoulders shadow reflecting on the floor. So the shadow figure actually cast its own shadow onto the floor, and it strolls across the room. I mean, it was probably maybe 3 or 4 seconds, and it literally just walks across the room. And so we thought, that had to be something pretty powerful to cast, to create this and then also cast its own shadow. I had never experienced anything like that. And the cyclone was what I had first noticed, because it was almost like this eerie silence. It kind of made me think of like, on a snowy day where, you go outside, it's after dark or whatever, and it's so silent, but you can hear the snowfall.
Yeah, you can hear the little tap of the snow falling. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of how this was.
Wow.
It was so silent, but there was something that you could hear, and then you just saw this walking across. So, and like I said, all 9 of us saw it, and it was, I believe if cameras had been going, I don't think we would have seen it.
Yeah.
I believe it was a direct, effect from the Native American experiments. I believe more so than anything else.
Yeah.
But, when I was sitting at the Lizzie Borden house and the lady described what she saw, and she said that little cyclone, that's the only other place or person that I've actually heard it described that way, was that spinning. It was so bizarre, but so cool. As far as visually, that's definitely probably one of my top experiences.
Oh, I bet.
That I've experienced actual visually, and then just to have all those other people witness it as well was pretty freaking awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean that's something to see right there. just that's like a manifestation, I would say, of, I mean, you're seeing it happen right there in front of
Mm-hmm.
you. The gathering of the energy and the forming of, yeah, whatever they're going to be. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's something else. That's a really, probably a rare thing to see too, I would
I
imagine.
think so, and we, everyone really realized that. I mean, we pretty well had to stop and take a break right after that. And I remember having a conversation with one of the ladies that was there, and we were both just like, okay, it's time. Okay, we've been shown this. It's time to sort of back off for a little while,
Yeah.
and go somewhere else. I mean, you really just got the feeling that it was like, there was something that was very powerful, and it was holding back on some of its powers that it could have probably, if it had wanted to, do something to one of us, it probably could have. And it's kind of like, okay, we need to kind of take a break for just a little bit, because that was it was a bit much
Oh, I
at the
bet.
moment, to for us to really be able to comprehend.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen those things before myself. I've some of the things I've seen, I've had to just step back for a little while and let my mind wrap around what I thought I
Yeah.
saw, and or what I knew I saw but didn't understand. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of things out there that'll happen like that, and you're not ready for them, and then when you
Hmm.
see them, you're just like, man, I've got to figure this out because it's about to
Yeah.
change my whole concept of reality.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And so there was a lot of that. And we still, when I talk to some of those other investigators, we still talk about that experience and just how insane that was.
yeah.
That we actually all were able to experience that.
Yep. Oh yeah. I mean, that's an awesome thing to see. And that's the thing, Miranda. You've seen some really cool stuff. You've had a lot of cool experiences and freaky experiences, stuff that I just don't know that I could even handle. Like, you know, I mean, I get told the same thing, but, it's just different, different things. And I have seen crazy things, and I know how it is. It's not like you can prepare for it when it happens or anything, but still, you handle it well with all the
Well, thank you.
craziness. Yeah, yeah. And everybody, please go check out Miranda's channel. She's about to release season 3 of Ghost Biker Explorations, and it's I'm just gauging from the trailers and stuff you've put out. It looks like it's going to be really good. And
It's definitely going to be a cool season.
yes, I think it will be. And Miranda does it herself now. So, I mean, it's amazing what she's done and how well she puts it together. So, everybody, I really urge you to go check it out and subscribe to her channel, share her episodes, everything. Miranda needs to be famous. More than I do.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, it's we're heading into the busy time here. That's October is when the entire season releases.
Yeah.
Every Tuesday night at 9, a new episode will come out, and that's 9 Eastern time.
Awesome.
Um, they'll come out. So yeah, I hope everyone will check that out and go back, check out the previous seasons. You
Yes.
can watch them either on the Ghost Biker Explorations YouTube channel or on the Ghost Biker Explorations Facebook page.
Awesome. Yes, they're really good episodes. Everybody, I mean, if you're into anything like that, just go check them out. And Miranda, you're based out of Tennessee, right?
I am out of the Chattanooga, Tennessee area,
Yeah.
but travel all over. If somebody has, I love the small local legend stories, and so if anyone has a cool story that is unique to your region and you want to share it, I would love to hear that story and possibly highlight it on an episode or a vlog.
Yes, please. Anybody. My dogs are acting up. My gosh, I could just kill them right now. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, everybody, if you have anything to tell Miranda, please get in touch with her, and or get in touch with me, and I'll tell you how to get in touch with her. So either way it goes. Um, oh man, he's driving me nuts. I have a wolf, like he's like an actual wolf, kind of. I mean, he was made to be one. A domesticated wolf is what they made the breed for. He's a northern Inuit, and he was the
Oh wow.
yeah, he was the dog, the breed they used on Game of Thrones for the dire wolves. And
Yeah.
yeah, he's massive. I mean, he's a big dog, but for a normal size, I mean, a normal dog, nothing like weird, but he's about as big as they get for a normal dog.
Wow.
Yeah, something that's not been on steroids and fed buckshot and gunpowder all her life.
Well, he
Yeah,
sounds big.
yeah, he is. He is. He's a big dog, like probably 160 pounds, maybe something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, he's just. I mean, it's ridiculous, but he eats a lot too. I spend a lot of money on dog food. Yeah. But anyway, all right, everybody. We're going to hang it up tonight. I really appreciate you sticking with me this late, Miranda. You've been
Absolutely.
awesome. Totally awesome. And
Absolutely.
everybody, don't forget, check out Miranda's channel and websites and episodes and everything. Order t-shirts and do all that stuff. And
Thank you all so much, and thank you for having me on, Ron.
oh yeah, no problem. My pleasure. Thank you for being on, Miranda, and we'll have you on again soon for sure.
Sounds great.
All
Looking
right.
forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you, and you take care and stay safe, and all of you guys take care and stay safe, and I will see you really soon with some more stuff that you might want to hear about. All right. Take it easy, everybody.